it's really hard to talk about. Hello, and welcome to Will's Infinite Library. I'm Will, and this is my Infinite Library. It's been a while since my last video, so I just wanted to catch you up to speed on what I've been reading because I've actually been reading quite a bit. I kind of thought I hadn't, but when I stopped and thought about it, I was like, yeah, I've been reading a lot. And I've also been doing a lot of writing lately, which is kind of why I've been away from this space. But I will talk a little bit more about that writing piece later. Or actually maybe right now, because that transitions me into what I was reading for a lot of the time since my last video. I got really into urban fantasy. White Trash Warlock and Trailer Park Trickster, that series really gripped me and made me think, maybe I could write urban fantasy. It's always been on my radar, but I never really realized how much I gravitate with it because I love reading and writing about the real world that we live in, but with like kind of fantastic elements, and it combines those two elements. Everywhere else it's a bit of a tough, like it's an edge case kind of, and there it's like it thrives. That's what it's for. So thinking about it more and wanting to write more in that space, and like I said, the White Trash Warlock Adam Binder series is really what kind of opened me up to urban fantasy. And David R. Slayton, the author of that series, always says in interviews and things like that, that if you want to write in a genre or a new genre to you, the best thing to do is to pick 3 books and really tear them apart. And they should be like recent books that are gonna catch you up to speed on what's going on in the genre now and really let you understand what works, what doesn't work, how stories are constructed, and then the pieces that you can use to construct the story that you're telling. So I picked 3 books as part of my Entry to Urban Fantasy 101 course that I invented for myself. Of course, White Trash Warlock was the #1 book I picked, and then I had to find 2 others. Another popular urban fantasy series in the queer side of things is the Tarot Sequence by Katie Edwards. And the first book is The Last Sun. I've heard a lot about this book, been really curious, and finally decided it was time to check it out for myself. And so I did. It was really fun. It was a really good read. I feel like, especially approaching it from like a craft perspective, I could see the plot and how it worked in it better than some other books, which was really helpful to me. I could see kind of like the main plot beats and how they were elevated and how the tension rose and that kind of thing. So I think it's really well paced, a really enjoyable read. It took me a little bit to get into it just because it's a very different kind of setting. It takes place in New Atlantis, and the setting is kind of one of my favorite things about it, which I'm learning more and more about myself. Setting is one of my favorite things in a book overall. But anyway, New Atlantis is this really cool place made by the Atlanteans, who are a magical society. And in New Atlantis, they've constructed, I believe it's Nantucket. They've taken Nantucket Island and constructed it into a new Atlantis. And what they've done is taken buildings that they could get, like buildings in disrepair or disuse from around the world, a lot of like major landmarks and things like that that are recognizable. And they've put them on this island and made this kind of like hodgepodge city of all these different aspects. And the main character is into that kind of architecture, and he's kind of like studying them and curious to learn more about the buildings. So that's a big piece of the setting, and I found it really cool and a really unique kind of world that they live in. I won't go into the plot too much other than to say, yeah, it's really fun and fast-paced. It really builds and has you thinking it's going to go one way, and that there's kind of this major quest to find a person. They find out what happens to them, I'll say, earlier than I expected. Then like a whole new plot unfolds around that, and it keeps like building and building. And about midway through the book, the pace really picked up and I couldn't put it down. The beginning was a little slower to build, and I think a lot of that's because it's a long series and I had to pick up steam. But then it really gets going and was really exciting and fun. So that is The Last Sun by Katie Edwards. So that was 2 urban fantasy books down. The third one that I decided to take a look at was Half Resurrection Blues by Daniel Jose Older. It's more, I guess I would say it's more pulpy than the other ones that I looked at. It adheres more to like the really strong developed tropes of urban fantasy, where it has this kind of like almost private investigator style protagonist. Really dark and gritty and really urban, set in New York City. And the main character works for this organization called the Council of the Dead. He is himself half dead, which is a weird thing. Like there's dead people and living people. He's the only half dead person he knows until he tracks down a target and finds that the target is also half dead. And then from there, he finds this is a thing that's happening. There are other half dead people. He's learning more about it, learning more about himself. And I think where the book really shines is in its really fast-paced plot. The chapters are really short and bite-sized. So it goes slow if you're reading one chapter at a time, but you can't because they're so small. They're like chips. So you have to keep eating more, reading more. And it really builds and builds. There's these really funny creatures called, oh gosh, I don't know how, it's NGK, I think is how it's spelled. I don't know how to say that. But yeah, that's what they're called. And they look like this. They're pretty funny, but they're also creepy. They're like little goblins kind of. And there's like an infestation of them, or they start like accumulating in New York, and it's kind of like a sign that bad things are gonna happen. And again, that's kind of the build up, and then you start to see that there's bigger things at play. Next book that I read recently was one that has been at the top of my reading list for a while. It just came out, and that is My Volcano by John Elizabeth Stintsey. This is a really weird book. It's from Arsenal Pulp Press, which is probably my favorite small press. So My Volcano, oh boy, I did not know what I was going to get. I heard about this book, that it was coming out, and I was like, this seems like the next book that I have to read. Like it just, from the description of like this volcano kind of magically appears in New York City, and people from around the world are caught up in like this kind of not quite apocalyptic, but I don't know how else to describe it. Like the world is changing drastically, and somehow I just had the sense that this was going to be like my next favorite book, and like the next book that was going to click with me, even though the description was kind of vague and didn't really let me know what I was getting in for. So a couple of things about this book. It's very, I won't say the book itself is slow, but I would recommend reading it slowly because it has tons of characters. It's written in very kind of bite-sized chunks as well and jumps around to different characters. And the writing is just beautiful. So I think unlike Half Resurrection Blues, where I would say like you read a small chapter and it makes you want to read the next one, this book makes me want to read a chapter and then kind of digest it and think about it and how it's building and how all of these stories are coming together. It kind of makes me want to slow down and savor it in that kind of way. And also because of the language level, it's also beautiful. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say about it is it's really kind of this book of our times, I guess I would say. Like it's very concerned with current events, where our world's going, where we are. To that end, there are a lot of real world events captured in it, a lot of terrible things that have happened, like shootings and police brutality, and just these kind of real world reminders that the world we live in is just as messed up as the world in My Volcano. And somehow it's one of those rare works of fiction where you can feel that fiction is being used as kind of a vessel for truth. Like the things that happen in it are weird and bizarre and absurd, but it feels true. It feels real, and it feels real in a way that if you just listed the terrible events that are happening, it wouldn't be as powerful. It wouldn't ring as true. It would just be like a list of terrible things. And this book includes that list, but it builds on them, and it kind of shows like where might we be going and what are we going to do with that, and how is everything going to smash together? What kind of hope is there? So I think this book asks all of those questions. I will not say if it answers them. Just really interesting, really thought-provoking, really beautiful, very poetic in terms of the language, but also poetic in terms of the plot, even I would say is poetic, if that's a thing. Like it has a very magical realist feeling to it. But yeah, amazing book. I can't recommend it highly enough, but it's really hard to talk about. And also with My Volcano, I pre-ordered the book because like I said, I just had this weird sense that I was meant to read this book next and it was going to be powerful and meaningful to me. So I pre-ordered it, and it came with these really cool cards. They're like collectible card game cards, with characters and kind of events from the book, which are just super cool. And like they have rules and all of these things. Like you could actually play this game, I assume. I only have 4 cards, so I don't know the rules. I don't think you can make a deck out of that, but maybe you could. And then I also, as a pre-order bonus, received a tarot reading with a tarot deck based on the book as well. And I got this card as my tarot reading, the green. And the question I had asked was, where are we going? And then the author sent this cool answer to where we're going. So I'll just leave that there for you for a second. But I thought that was really interesting. And that kind of ties into like with the reading of the green is like this kind of unstoppable force of nature that kind of tries to take the world back as humans are doing all these terrible things to it. And so in the reading, they said that the green means that you're on your way towards something intimidating, but ultimately welcoming and empowering. And right after I received it, I found out that my grandmother had passed away, and I didn't know. I haven't been to visit my family since 2019, since before COVID. And I thought, do I go? She was the last of my grandparents that was still living, so it's like a whole generation from my family gone, and it just felt like I really need to be there. I don't know if I feel great about traveling now, but I kind of feel like it's time. I need to go, be as safe as I can for myself and everyone that I interact with, but it's time. So I feel like that might be my intimidating but ultimately welcoming and empowering thing, because it's like terrible circumstances, but I think it will ultimately be really good because I haven't seen my family in years, and I don't want to get to a point where it's been like 5 years, it's been 10 years, because who knows how long this pandemic is going to last. So I'll just do the best I can and hope everything turns out well and that I get to see everyone, and it's really nice. But then also on that note, I wanted to say that's why I'm wearing this shirt of the Green Valley Book Fair, because when I am there visiting family, I would like to go check out the book fair. And maybe I can take some footage for you to take you on a little tour as well. So I'll see if that works out. I'm not really sure, but it would be nice. It would be cool. So in the spirit of that, I wore the shirt. And then the last book I wanted to talk about today is The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd. Is another book that was on my radar for a long time. And I guess it's maybe because I'm getting more into Booktube now that I anticipate book releases more. It used to be that I'd go into the bookstore, or maybe it's COVID. I'd go into the bookstore and see what's usually like the staff recommendations. I was like, yes, the staff knows what's up. They make good recommendations. But in this case, now I'm finding more books and pre-ordering them and getting excited for releases. So this was one I was excited for to come out. I'd heard about it. The setup sounded amazing. And to me, what it sounded like was that it was going to scratch the itch that Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore has left me with, and kind of being in that same vein. And so I picked it up with those kind of expectations that it would be Mr. Penumbra's bookstore with maps instead of books, essentially, because there's like the secret society and like this reverence for maps and old things, and then like technology also comes into play. And it really started hitting all of those notes right off the bat. Like the main character felt kind of similar. The mystery unfolded right away. There was I don't know, the tone just felt similar. Like it was kind of this quirky academic tone. I've heard people say it's dark academia, but I don't even really know what that means. I feel like it just gets thrown around. But it is fairly academic. It's not, I guess it's dark. I don't know. But so it started hitting all those notes of Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. And then there was like this super powerful corporation that was fictional, and like it just had all the same vibes of Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. I was really enjoying it. That was like the first 70 pages or so, and then suddenly it changed. And I will give you a reading tip like I did with Less, because I feel like it kind of disappointed me. But if you go in with the right expectations, it's not disappointing. The book isn't disappointing. It's just the way it was set up, or like what I expected wasn't what happened. And that's just because there are basically two plot lines. There's one of the main character in the present trying to unravel a secret about a map. And then there's another plot line where there's this group of people in the past, and you're kind of learning the origin story of the map. And I thought we'd just get little snippets of that, but it really, like, that story really picks up the one in the past. It becomes a lot of the book. So I would say to expect two storylines that alternate between past and present. Don't get too caught up in the present, because I was like, I want to see what happens next. And then like suddenly here comes like this long scene that happens in the past. And the other thing too is I was again caught up in the main character at her quest. And then like kind of her love interest starts becoming more like the focus of chapters. So it'll be like you'll have a chapter with the main character, and then you'll have a flashback chapter that's like pretty sizable. And then you'll get back to the present and think, oh yes, we get to get back to like what she's doing and what's happening. But then it goes to her love interest and what he's doing at the, he works at that big corporation and what he's doing there. And I'm like, well, I want to see what's happening with the map that, you know, like that I was set up to want to know more about. And then it'll go back to the past again. And I'm like, what is she doing? What's happening? So it was a little frustrating in that sense, but I see why it is the way it is. And I think if you go in with that expectation, you'll enjoy it and not be disappointed. So that is The Cartographers. That's what I've been reading. I'd love to hear what you've been reading lately. I know there are a lot of great books coming out, and there is a big backlog of books throughout time to also catch up on. So I hope you are reading some good books. Feel free to drop me some recommendations in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. As always, happy reading, and I will see you next time.